Okay, we will start the session. Uh, Thank you, President Bharat. Good evening, friends and members of Rotary family. It's my pleasure to introduce the guest speaker for today, Dr. Prasanna Venkatesh, Senior Consultant Pediatric Urologist and also Managing Director of NU Hospitals. NU is the country's first standalone nephrology and urology hospital to achieve dual distinction of being accredited by both NABH and NABL. In layman terms, these are certifications from the Quality Council of India in the field of healthcare and lab testing. Also, NU is the largest nephro, urology, and fertility chain of hospitals in our country. Currently based out of 6 locations, 3 in Karnataka, 2 in Tamil Nadu, and 1 in the Maldives. Dr. Prasanna is a surgeon and a fellow of pediatric urology. His specializations include from kidney transplants to kidney stone diseases and all other areas of urology. Second, application of minimal invasive techniques in urologic surgery. Friends, I have posted doctor's very detailed profile in our WhatsApp group. Please have a look of the same. His other areas of interest include one, cost reduction in medical treatment and delivering high quality and service to benefit the patients. And to achieve this, NU Hospital have adopted best use of IT in hospital management, brought in world-class treatment through use of technology and medical equipments. Second, bringing in digital marketing in healthcare, which I understand is ethical. Expansion of NU hospital chains to other parts of India. Through NU Trust, various philanthropic initiatives have been rendered to the needy to meet the medical treatment. About his education, Dr. Prasanna is a gold medalist and outstanding student at a school, Montfort, Accord, and also a gold medalist from the Mysore University during his MBBS program. He completed his Master's General Surgery from JN Medical College, Belgaum, and fellowship from Rajiv Gandhi University of Health Sciences in the area of pediatric urology. Besides, he has also undergone training at Boston Children's Hospital in the United States in the similar domain. Doctor is not new to Rotary. In fact, Rotary Club of Jeevan Bima Nagar, along with other European clubs, have implemented a global grant project at NU Hospital in the year 2015 with 3 dialysis machines. I understand this is an 8-year agreement. The hospital will run these machines. Also, NU Hospital does regularly walkathon with our Rotary clubs. On personal side, Dr. Prasanna and myself are from the same school. I'm his senior by many, many years. However, our bonding remains very strong due to very close school alumni association. Now, let's welcome Dr. Prasanna and listen to his talk on this hot topic. And I request you, Doctor, to guide us to swim through this pandemic successfully. Over to you, Doctor.
Thank you very much, Rotarian Sundar Prakash, and good evening to everybody. I will just share my screen and then I will get back to you. Just give me one moment, please.
Before the doctor comes in, I would just like to tell all our Rotarians, kindly start posting your questions, clarifications, whatever you have in the chat session. And specifically, if you want to ask a question, please raise your hand so that Rashmi will be able to unmute you and you can definitely ask the question.
Okay. Good evening to everyone. It is an honor for me to be here this evening. I would like to try and keep this session as interactive as possible. Thank you very much, Rotary Bangalore Rajmahal Villas branch. And I'm happy to note that Jeevan Bima Nagar branch is also there today. Thank you, the office bearers, Rotarian Bharat, and everyone else. So I'm going to brief you today on the actual aspects of COVID-19, along with what are the possible preventive measures that we can take, and what is the current situation of the hospital beds in Bangalore. And going forward, how long do we think that this will last, and what are the options that we have? Like Rotarian Sundar Prakash said, that we are not new to Rotary. We've had multiple associations with the Rotarians all around Bangalore. And in the year 2015, the Rotary Club of Bangalore Jeevan Bima Nagar was kind enough to host this project through a global grant, where they donated 3 dialysis machines. And to date, it is benefiting so many patients, and we also give an annual report. And yes, this is an 8-year project. I will just share a few photographs of the inauguration ceremony that was there. And so many of the patients that have actually benefited from this are so thankful. On the same day, we also did a walkathon in the morning to raise awareness for kidney disorders in and around Padmanabh Nagar. And that is the plaque that is there. And you can see the different clubs from all across the world that have donated for this particular project. So thank you very much, Rotary. NU Trust and NU Hospitals gives its gratitude, and all our team members thank Rotary for everything that they do in the city and around the globe. So coming back to the topic of discussion today, now the COVID-19 is a new virus. That's why it's called as a novel virus. And the size is extremely tiny. It's just 0.1 to 0.125 microns. So actually speaking, what happens is that whatever we wear, whichever mask we wear, these microns of the virus is so small, it will definitely pass through. So then how do we prevent this, and why are masks so important? What we should understand is that this is a droplet infection. The virus cannot survive on its own. The virus will survive only with a droplet around it. And droplets are large size. So when we wear a mask, and when the person sitting opposite to us or beside us wears a mask, the infection rate drops dramatically. It really doesn't matter what type of mask. I will be coming to the different types of masks. But what is more important is, until this pandemic session, the pandemic lives through its natural history, where wearing masks is one of the primary ways of preventing transmission of infection. These droplets tend to increase when somebody coughs, somebody sneezes, or somebody laughs, or sings, or pants, or when you work out, when you breathe very heavily. It tends to increase if there is a lot of crowd. So that's the basic principle of this. The second thing what happens is that once we cough, then we have the droplets on our hands, and then when we go and touch fomites could be tabletops, door handles, lift buttons, etc. Then we can leave behind residue of the virus where it can spread to somebody else. So those are the sizes of the respiratory droplets. So what we're trying to prevent in masks is prevention of transmission of the droplets. So protection, but cannot be only with personal protective equipment. The word PPE is used as a generic term. PPE depends upon where you are, whether you're at home, whether you're outside, whether you're in a healthcare setting, whether you're in a public place, the PPE will differ. In a healthcare setting, somebody in the ICU versus somebody in the outpatient, the PPE will also differ. But one point of interest that all of us should know, whatever precautions we are taking at work, we need to take those similar precautions whenever we go outside. It could be to a grocery store, petrol pump, it could be anywhere on the road. The trick is we should try and maximize to avoid exposure. That is our best defense as of now. And I will tell you why in some time to come. So when they test masks, these filters which the mask testing devices use test up to 80 to 90 liters per minute. Whereas our normal breathing, we breathe in 10 to 30 liters per minute, depending upon what type of activity that we do. So that is why it is important. Any type of mask is more than adequate. Now, coming to the conventional masks, you got all those percentages. In a large community setting, it becomes very difficult for people to use specific PPE. So any of these masks that you can use are listed, but it has those percentages. So therefore, whatever mask that you use, minimum should have at least a 40% protection rate. You would have seen a lot of healthcare workers or even people outside wearing what is called as an N95 respirator. It is called N95 because it has got a 95% chance of protection. It's a regulated medical device, not for general use. It is reserved for healthcare workers because it blocks 95% of the particles. And you have an N99 mask which is also available, which blocks 99.5%. But what happens with N95 or N99 masks is it gets very difficult to breathe and it gets difficult to wear it for a protracted period of time. The other point is you would have noticed a lot of them wearing these masks with the exhalation valve. This is a definite no. People should not be using this because you're breathing in through the filter of the mask, but you're exhaling the air at high velocity through that red valve device which is there. And what happens is because so much of expiration air is coming out through such a small nozzle, the amount of distance that the droplet can move along is very, very high and it comes out at a lot of pressure. These are masks that are supposed to be used in areas where there is a lot of dust, where there is construction activity and other things. Surgical masks are again, which is very good. We should have a triple layered surgical mask. There are 3 layers. It is generally identified by a white inside and a colored outside. The white inside portion can absorb certain amount of moisture, and that's the filter that is there. This is a good alternative to use, but generally you can use that for around 8 hours and then you need to discard it. Another point about the disposal of the used masks. Today, what's happening all across the world with the PPE being used by billions of people, this is another huge wastage that is getting generated. And there is an opportunity for contamination for the other workers who handle these waste PPE material. Therefore, you need to better dispose it along with bleach. And those are the percentages that is there. Soak it for around half an hour and then dispose it. I just put up one slide to tell you why you should not keep bringing the mask down to the chin. Then all the contamination from your nose, your expired hair, sits on the neck. And then when you move it up, then you keep touching your neck, you keep touching your nose, you keep touching the eyes. And then that's how you get the virus into the body. So the virus can get in through the mouth, through the nose, through the eyes, and any other open wounds or mucous membrane. And typically, it will be surprising to note that most of us touch our face at least 10 to 20 times every hour, or if not more. So we need to resist the temptation to touch our face, and also do not touch the outer surface of the mask, because that's where the droplets are sitting. When you want to adjust the mask, you will have to touch it in the side. If you touch it in the front, then you're contaminating your hands. So coming to the second and most important way in which we prevent the transmission is, of course, wash your hands. Wash your hands, there is no fixed time. You have to wash your hands before and after a contact with somebody else using something else, especially at work. Also, the other way that you can do is wash your hands once in 2-3 hours. A combination of washing hands and mask has shown that the pandemic is in reasonable control in countries that are following this, typically like South Korea, Japan, Singapore, versus countries that are not following it, like for example the United States, and to a large extent in India, you find that the cases are ballooning out significantly. So the second point is washing your hands. You can use hand sanitizer, you can use soap and water, it really doesn't matter, but you need to ensure that you wash your hands. The third and most important point to prevent this infection is social distancing. I mean, we are all aware of it, but I just put up some pictures which are actually all self-explanatory. If you can avoid going out, make sure that you don't gather together within home or outside, work from home where possible, conduct meetings like what we are doing, and keep the vulnerable population away. And I have put certain risk factors. Going to the doctor is generally a low risk because we presume that the healthcare facility takes all the precautions. Then going to a restaurant is there. Going to a wedding or going to a swimming pool is obviously a little more higher risk. Getting a haircut, going to the beach if there is social distancing, exercising on the gym is a high risk because everybody is breathing very hard. And that means that the chance of the droplets going very much ahead is also there. And of course, flying on a plane because you're putting too many people in an enclosed space. And I continue with the social distancing. So it's better to avoid gathering in public places, concerts, athletic events, crowded retail stores, and mass transit systems like the metro, which the government itself has not opened despite for so many months. And you need to be cautious in places like the grocery store, restaurants, or when you're traveling. It is safe to walk or hike as long as you keep a distance. It's safe to clean outside. It's safe to go for a drive within the car. And of course, it's safe for everything else as long as you know that the crowding is not there. And this is another nice chart. I think Rotarian Sundar Prakash will be sharing the PowerPoint with you. You all can go through that. But you have all the way from green till red, where attending a religious service or going to a movie theater is at the highest risk, whereas going to the gas station or opening the mail is the lowest risk. When you do need to go to the grocery store, keep the social distance. The social distancing is one of the key aspects. And of course, make sure that you don't buy food where the packets are opened, and try and sanitize your hands, as I said, before and after each contact. Now, these are things easier said than done because every single time you need to consciously train yourself to ensure that you do this. One of the other reasons why we feel that COVID is spreading so fast is because we think that our office colleagues, they are my colleagues, you know, so I can speak to them without a mask, or they are my close friends, or they're my relatives who've come to visit me. But the point is, we should understand that a big chunk of the population, 60% of people who are positive, are asymptomatic carriers. They do not have any symptoms. They do not develop any symptoms, but they can transmit the infection. The person to whom they transmit the infection, if he or she is in the vulnerable age group, less than 10 years, greater than 60, or having associated comorbidities like diabetes, hypertension, overweight, obesity, or if they are on any other medications that causes their immunity to come down, then they are at a higher risk. So therefore, even if they are your colleagues, even if they are your friends, even if they are your relatives, as long as they're not your primary family members staying with you at home, you shouldn't be speaking to them without a mask. It is risky at the moment. There are many myths and facts in the COVID virus, but one of the things which I commonly see is cold weather kills it, hot weather kills it, extremes of temperature kills it. But actually no, because despite whatever the temperature is outside, our human body maintains the temperature between 36.5 and 37. And what are the common symptoms of COVID-19, which is the next question. This is an interesting slide because it gives you some sort of an insight on the difference between COVID-19 and the common flu, which it mimics very closely. And on the left side, you have everything that COVID-19 could cause. It could be a single symptom. It could be a combination of multiple symptoms. It could be no symptoms. So that is the difficulty in trying to assess this. But just have a look at this. And I will take it one step further. For the symptom onset is generally gradual in COVID-19, but in flu it's very rapid. And the severity, as I said, 60% of them have no symptoms, 30% of them have mild symptoms, 5% of them have moderate symptoms, and 5% of them have severe symptoms, and the mortality is around 2–2.5%. So a big chunk of people who get infected, 97.5%, will come out of this. So that is the important message. It's not as dreary or scary, or we don't need to panic with this. But the point is, when something goes beyond a certain level, we need to know how to seek medical help early, which I will be telling you about. So COVID-19 generally is 2 to 14 days. And people start getting sick between day 5 and day 9, especially as they enter the second week. Whereas a flu generally settles in 1 to 4 days. And then you have all those common symptoms. In the current pandemic, the ICMR, which is the Indian Council of Medical Research, and the Ministry of Health guidelines is anybody with an influenza-like symptom, anybody with any of these symptoms need to get tested for COVID-19. That's a very, very important point. Second point, if anybody tests positive, all their primary contacts, what do you mean by primary contact? Anybody who is in contact with that person for greater than 15 minutes without PPE. What is the PPE? PPE subject to that particular area, which can be even a simple mask. All of them also require to be tested after 5 days if they are asymptomatic. If they are symptomatic, they need to be tested early. One of the reasons why we find that people getting ill very quickly is this hesitancy to get tested, partly because of the stigma associated with COVID-19. That is something that we need to educate our citizens, that there is no stigma involved in it. Anybody could get infected. We are all in the same platform. And the point is that soon as any of the influenza-like symptoms are there, we require to get tested. If test comes negative, we continue the precautions. If test comes positive, then we will see how to go ahead. Also involve the primary contacts. Many a time we find already in this current pandemic with these lockdowns and everything for 4–5 months, patients coming to all hospitals, a lot of them are coming very late. Not only for COVID illnesses, even for non-COVID illnesses. Something could have been treated. They hesitate to come to the hospitals. Believe me, most hospitals are more safer than probably a grocery store or somewhere else where there will be a congregation of people, including in the office. Because in the hospital, generally healthcare workers are aware on how to actually manage this. So how does seasonal flu and COVID-19 actually compare? There is something called as the RO number. That's an important number. So at the bottom of the range, every single person who is COVID-19 positive can infect between 2 to 2.5 people. That's why the virus is so contagious as compared to the regular flu, which is 1.3 people. Incubation time for COVID-19 is 14 days. Hospitalization rate is higher and the fatality rate is also high. Why this is important is, think about India's population of nearly 1.3 billion, even 2% or 3% is an extraordinarily high number. So that is the issue. Second thing is, even in Bangalore has close to around 35,000 beds, but Bangalore population is 1.2 crore. So what happens is it completely overwhelms the healthcare system because a whole lot of people are getting infected at a small time frame. So once somebody is diagnosed with the COVID-19, then you need to categorize them into whether they have mild symptoms, moderate symptoms, or severe symptoms. Mild symptoms is if their saturation, oxygen saturation is normal, they may have some mild fever or body pain, which is common in any other flu. Moderate symptoms is when they develop some pneumonia patches and also when their oxygen saturation falls below 94. Severe symptoms is when the oxygen saturation drops below 88 and when they have other comorbidities or when they have other significant symptoms like shortness of breath. There are two options. You have to understand the difference between home quarantine and home isolation. The word quarantine is used when somebody has given their test and waiting for the report. The word quarantine is also used when somebody travels internationally or interstate. Internationally or interstate, and when they are waiting for their quarantine period to get over and when they're waiting to get tested. Versus the word isolation is when somebody is tested positive and they require to be isolated. Today's guidelines are, as long as you're able to have an independent bedroom with a toilet, if you are greater than 10 years, less than 60 years, if you do not have any comorbidities like diabetes, hypertension, if you're not pregnant, don't have any renal disorder or cardiac disorder, you can be isolated at home if you are asymptomatic or having mild symptoms. So there are a lot of hospitals that tie up with home isolation. I will be sharing a lot of that to Rotarian Sundar Prakash, who can share it to you again on WhatsApp. There are different hospitals that have tied up to do telemedicine for home isolation, where they will monitor you twice. They also give you a kit with a pulse oximeter, etc., and they will train you on how to use that. So that is a very good option rather than getting admitted at the moment, as long as you have mild symptoms. And when you are checking this and documenting all of that in the chart, you will know when you require to get admitted if you have moderate symptoms or severe symptoms. For people who cannot do isolation at home, either because they have vulnerable people at home, they have young children, or they have elderly at home, or they have them at home, but they also do not have a room where they can stay, because there are a big chunk of our population in the city who live in two-room houses or three-room houses where there are 5-6 people in the house. So what happens is the government has arranged for COVID care centers. I have visited a few. They have done a reasonably good job and they take care very well. And there are different organizations that supply food. And believe me, they're quite clean. And the government has enough beds for COVID care centers. So once you test positive, so what happens is there is a unique identification number given to every patient that is positive. So they have to wait at home, and the BBMP will call generally after a day or two and shift them to a COVID care center, or give them an option of doing home isolation for patients who have mild symptoms or patients who are asymptomatic. So this is a choice, as long as you don't fall under the vulnerable category. The second step is the COVID-19 hospitals. Now, COVID-19 hospitals are two types. One is there is designated government COVID-19 hospitals, and there are private hospitals that admit COVID-19 patients under two categories. One category is they admit them under the government beds, and the second category is they admit them under their own private beds under insurance or cash paying facility. Now, here comes the little difficulty in getting admitted to a COVID-19 hospital. But believe me, The government and the coordination, they're doing a reasonably good job, but it will take at least 1 day to 1.5 days to get admitted to a government COVID-19 hospital or to get admitted to a private COVID-19 hospital through the government facility. I'm going to share a list of hospitals in the private sector that are admitting COVID-19 patients based on their either through the government quota or through the insurance or the paying quota. We have enough number of beds, and what is more important is today the hospitals now are admitting only moderately sick to severely sick patients. The difficulty that currently we are having is the shortage of ICU beds. Is there a scarcity in the city? There is definitely a scarcity in the city. How do we overcome all of this? Most important is that we need to get tested early. Soon as anybody develops influenza-like symptoms, please get tested. That's point one. Point two, ensure the primary contacts are tested. Point three, while you are waiting for the test report, you need to quarantine yourself. Once the test report comes positive, you need to isolate, continue home quarantine, and then there is a list of medications, etc. Please do all of that under medical supervision. As much as information, there is so much of information overload on COVID that a lot of them self-medicate. And then what happens? See, there are two critical events that happen between day 5 and day 8. I will just explain it to you briefly medically. One, what happens is there is a drop in saturation. If the drop in saturation is not picked up, it is a medical condition what is called as happy hypoxia. Hypoxia means when your oxygen saturation goes less than 94%. Normal it should be 96 and 97% above. What typically happens, generally a normal adult, even if their oxygen saturation goes below 88%, they're going to start feeling fatigue and shortness of breath. For some reason, because COVID-19 takes that long time to incubate and grow the body's inflammatory response, people with even a low saturation of 65 and 70%, unless they check with the pulse oximeter, what happens is it's not identified. And every day is important. Currently, anybody who is isolated or quarantined needs to check their oxygen saturation once in 4 hours. Now, if they're not doing that, and if they do not identify that the oxygen saturation is low, then they get into trouble. The second thing what happens is there is something called as a cytokine storm. It's not the COVID-19 virus that actually is very injurious to people. It is the body's own response against the infection that can overwhelm the defenses, especially when somebody is having diabetes, hypertension, heart disease, renal disorders, or they're on some immunosuppressive drugs, or they're greater than 60. So the moral of the story is early hospitalization and to do everything under medical supervision. So it comes back to my initial advice stating that please get tested early. If you get tested early, then you're monitored early. Remember this 60, 35, 5 and out of 5, 3. 60% asymptomatic, 35% mild to moderate symptoms, 5% severe symptoms, 2.5% mortality. We are, a big chunk of us are in the 95%. Early testing, early identification helps us to remain in that. A couple of other suggestions and advice that I have. In India, what happens? All of us take health insurance. All of us take life insurance. All of us insure our vehicles because the vehicle insurance is compulsory. But unfortunately, the penetration of health insurance is a paltry 8%. Only 8% of our population. I'm not talking about the ESI and the public sector units having the health insurance, but in the private sector, it's only 8% of them who have health insurance. And therefore, in times like this, it becomes all the more needed. On July 10th, the government through the IRIDA has instructed all the healthcare insurance companies to give 2 policies. One is the COVID-19 Raksha policy and the COVID-19 Kavach policy. These are covered for periods of 1 month, 3 months, 6 months, 9.5 months. And the COVID-19 Raksha policy pays a one-time amount up to 2.5 lakhs based on the premium that you take. Soon as you get a ICMR recognized laboratory test that is showing a COVID positive, they will transfer that amount to your bank account. A COVID-19 Kavach policy is up to 5 lakh rupees. The advantage of these policies are they're relatively cheap. They cost anywhere between 1,000 to 2,500 rupees based on the age. They're available online and they can be taken easily up to the age of 65. Children also you can cover as long as the proposer is above 18 years. And the other advantage of this is that it covers PPE, it covers consumables also. It does not cover quarantine and isolation for asymptomatic people. It covers home care. So supposing you choose home care and you're staying at home and then you've chosen that package in the hospital, it will cover that. You'll have to pay and claim reimbursement, and it will also cover your test. So I would urge all of you to take this health insurance policy, take it for 5 lakh rupees, take it for 9.5 months, and this can be a value addition to you over and above your regular health insurance policy. So once you complete this, then you can use your regular health insurance policy. You can take it in any company. It really doesn't matter. The difference is hardly a few hundred rupees. The average bill throughout the country has been around 2.5 lakh rupees. The average bill. You will find that small subset of people who get very sick where the bills may go to 10 lakh, 12 lakh, 15 lakh, but that's a very, very small number. If you're choosing to get admitted in a government facility or in a government approved private hospital through the government quota, then all of that is actually covered by the government. Now, what is herd immunity and will that work in India? See, most pandemics last for 1 to 1.5 years. Every 100 years, there has been a pandemic. The last pandemic was somewhere around just when the World War got over in 1919, and it killed more people than the World War itself because the concept of understanding all of this was not there. Today, we have much better understanding. Our healthcare facilities are much better. We understand the concept of masks, of hand hygiene and social distancing. Herd immunity happens when 60 to 65% of the population develop infection and antibodies to the virus, and therefore the virus has no other place to spread, and then you develop an immunity. Since this is a new virus, a herd immunity will become an extremely expensive exercise with terms of lives lost in India, and therefore it is not a good option. Because as I told you, 1.3 billion people, even if 700 million people need to get the herd immunity, you calculate 3% mortality of that, it is still extremely high. So herd immunity is not an option. Most pandemics, if you look historically, take anywhere between 1.5 to 2 years to develop herd immunity. So how long is this going to last? My best guess is it will be till around September, October 2021. Why I am telling you that is all of us have to be prepared mentally, emotionally, psychologically, financially for the next almost a year or so, and continue to take all these precautions. What about vaccines? This is something that is extremely good news, fantastic news, because generally vaccine development takes 5 to 7 years. Hopefully we will have the vaccines out by December, January. And after that, the vaccination process will start. But you should understand that vaccines take time to manufacture. There is a logistical nightmare to distribute it. And all of you in Rotary are well aware with the Pulse Polio program. There are millions and millions of people who require to get vaccinated. And at the moment, we have injectable vaccines, which makes it difficult as compared to polio drops, for example, because you require trained people to inject them. And then who gets the vaccine first? Is it going to be the frontline healthcare workers, the police, the defense force? Is it going to be the vulnerable population who are greater than 60 or those who have comorbidities and less than 10 years of age? No government is talking about it. Slowly, they are starting to speak about it. And then you will have all the confusion that's going to happen when the vaccines actually come. And by the time 60% of the population is vaccinated, it will take at least July to September of next year. So we're looking at that much window period, but we are in a far better shape as compared to any of the earlier pandemics. So that's good news, really good news that the vaccine is coming. Now, coming to certain things that we need to do psychologically to keep ourselves fit, I think at some time, all of us need to take a break from this COVID-19 over-information that keeps hitting us from all angles, be it from the television, from social media, you or your newspaper, so much of negative news. So you also need to take care of your body and make time to unwind, maybe chat with a friend. And these are some of the suggestions of the World Health Organization. You need to talk to people. It is normal to feel low on certain days. It is normal to feel depressed. It is normal to get angry at people who are with you all the time. We've all not been used to being together for such protracted period of time. It is important to maintain a healthy lifestyle, proper diet, get good sleep, keep yourself physically active, continue to maintain your social contacts through the virtual platform, and bide your time. Why I use the word bide your time? People who got infected in February and March, at that point of time, they thought that ventilator was the only thing. And now we realize that ventilators really don't help and we don't require that many ventilators. The understanding of the disease over the last 4-5 months has simply been phenomenal. Doctors, hospitals across the world have been able to save so many more lives because the pathophysiology of the disease process is understood. We now do understand that it is an inflammatory process. It affects the blood vessels, it affects clotting, it affects the heart, it affects so many things. Earlier, the thought process was it affects only the lungs. As we bide our time, another 3 months, there is going to be so much more better understanding for the healthcare team to understand how to take care of patients better. And probably if we are lucky, we will also get vaccinated. Please do not get fatigued that 4 months are over. How long to wait? Is it going to be another 4 months, another 5 months, another 7 months? It really doesn't matter in the long run. So we need to bide our time. Even if we get infected, which is a possibility, the chance of us developing serious symptoms is only 5 to 10%. But if we develop that, say, 3 months later or 4 months later, the hospitals and doctors will have so many other tricks to treat you better. You are also closer to getting a vaccine. So we need to bide our time. That's very important. So I continue to stress on this. Mental health, mental well-being during any pandemic is very important for various reasons, because we could have family related pressures, we could have financial related pressures, we could have work related pressures. I don't think there is any single individual on the planet who has not been affected by the pandemic. Every one of us have been affected. We need to support each other and we need to ensure better times will come. We need to look at the light at the end of the tunnel. So whatever helps for you, if you think that practicing yoga helps, talking to friends helps, exercising helps, anything. And if you wish to read the news, read positive COVID news. Don't read negative COVID news too much, and have a significant portion of the day where you don't constantly keep reading this. That's extremely important. As I said, there is a lot of good news that's also coming up, and I would want to end this talk speaking to you about all the good news. Drugs are coming, combinations are coming, doctors are able to understand the disease process better. There are 130 companies trying to get these vaccines. There are more than 8 to 10 companies that are already in the phase 2, phase 3 trials. 2 of them are even in India with the phase 1. This much of research, this much of medication in the pharmaceutical space has not happened for a very, very long time for any disease. Y'all are aware, to make a polio vaccine, it took 45, 50 years. So we're trying to compress that in 1.5 years. We might not have the best of the best vaccines, but it is still a good thing to start. So we should understand that the government also has certain limitations. They have limitations with people. Hospitals also have limitations because a lot of their own healthcare workers are getting sick, requiring to be quarantined. And healthcare workers also constantly have it in their mind that they are probably the carriers for their family members. But the good news is a vast part of our country, be it healthcare workers, police officials, the sanitary care workers, so many NGOs, so many people feeding so many people. To the largest extent, I think India has stood up and India has done so much. Let us not go only by the negative news that generally takes the headlines. For the size of our population, I think we have done reasonably well, and that is because a lot of them have contributed, and a lot of them have followed good advice, and we need to continue to do that. So these are some simple do's and don'ts which I made for my apartment complex. I'll be sharing it with you. So anybody who's staying in community apartments or villas or gated communities, I think y'all could use this. This is extremely important. The most important thing is that we should never hide facts about our health condition. I think everybody is educated and mature enough to understand that, and we should not be worried about baseless rumors and fears. And the most important is that whatever the good practices that we are doing at work or at home, we need to do it everywhere else. This is my last slide of the talk. So these are the happiness chemicals that is there in our brain, and this is how you hack them. You have dopamine, serotonin, endorphin, and oxytocin. Anything that we do this makes us feel happy. So we need to move away from the negativity to the positivity, because I have a different take on this. Can we do anything to slow the pandemic spread? We can. As a population, we need to do those three things which I spoke in the beginning of my talk, which is the masks, hand hygiene, and social distancing. Can we do anything to cut down the time? Unfortunately, we can't. We can either do it either with herd immunity or with vaccines. I've already told you herd immunity is not an option. So we need to wait for the vaccines. How long the vaccine will take, I have already explained that to you. So therefore, it is important to mentally prepare ourselves for the long haul. It is like when the Navy sailors get into the submarine, they know that they're not going to see land or the surface for 20 days. So the sooner we accept that is better. But instead of 20 days, if the captain decides to bring up the submarine in 8 days, everybody is happy. So I did tell September 2020. I may be right, I may be wrong. But if that moves up to March, then everybody is happy. But it is important for us to keep ourselves positive up until then. And what better way than to stimulate these happiness chemicals? So a word or two about our hospital, because Rotarian Sundar Prakash wanted me to speak about this. So we are a super specialty hospital dealing with nephrology and urology care. We have two branches, Rajajinagar and Padmanabhanagar in Bangalore. And we cover all the subspecialties of the broad specialty of nephrology and urology, which include pediatric urology, onco-urology, kidney transplantation, dialysis, etc., etc. And we also take care of men's sexual health, male fertility, female fertility, and IVF, because this is a part of the genitourinary system. And these are some of the pictures of our Rajajinagar branch. I will just quickly go through that. So that's our dialysis unit. The Rotary Club of Jeevan Bhima Nagar actually gave these machines to our Padmanabhanagar branch. That's our operation theater and some pictures of the room. And we also have an NU trust which is in existence since 1999. This is our social service wing. We take care of the subsidized care of patients who cannot afford. Unfortunately, the philanthropy in the renal space is very limited as compared to, say, ophthalmology or oncology. And unfortunately, the renal space is a chronic kidney disease where people will need to spend 20 to 25,000 rupees per month to undergo dialysis. So we try and focus whatever the money that we receive in kind or in grant or in equipment to people whom we can make a difference. So correctable causes of kidney failure, correctable causes of pediatric urogenital anomalies, which unfortunately hit the lower socioeconomic class, we take care of them. We also as an organization educate all our housekeeping and security team members. This we've been doing for 20 years. Some of them have gone on to become doctors, lawyers. We've supported them through college. And some of them in turn now are supporting the other children. At any time, any of you are welcome to visit any one of our units, and we will be happy to show you the work that we do. Once again, thank you, Rotarian Sundar Prakash. He's a good friend. He was senior in my school. Thank you very much for this opportunity. It was wonderful meeting all of you virtually. Thank you, Rotary Club of Raj Mahal Vilas branch and Jeevan Bhima Nagar. And I'll be happy to take any questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Prasanna. Definitely a wonderful and very precise information you have provided. And also the thing I liked was the information on the insurance part. I think many of us have not done this COVID coverage or the Raksha policy. I think we should go ahead and do that. Now the floor is open to all the Rotarians. Please be free to post your question in the chat session or raise your hand. You can ask your Rashmi will unmute you.
So I can see one question on face shields. That's an interesting question. Face shields are to be used whenever you're in close contact with anyone. But the point about face shield is, see, we use the face shield and then nobody cleans the outer surface of the face shield. If you don't clean the outer surface of the face shield, then that becomes a fomite for transmission. So we will need to use that as long as we understand the requirement for that. So anywhere where you're in close contact, it's good to use the face shield. BCG, I see another question about BCG. There was a talk that in India, a lot of us have been vaccinated by BCG, but studies have not proven otherwise. And we do know that the numbers in India are climbing exponentially. One thing that we know is across all countries throughout the world, the pattern has been similar. Countries which follow social distancing, hand hygiene and masks, the pandemic is flattening out. Countries which don't, we will get a peak. Now, the significant rise of cases that we're having in India is simply because of the size of our population. Our population is so huge. And the last point is the transparency in which the countries are reporting. Certain countries will report the exact numbers and certain countries may not report. I see another question on efficacy of homemade masks. They can be used, no problem. Only thing is wash your mask every day. Put it into the washing machine or hand wash it. Make sure that you wash your mask every day. It's very important. Neighbors, houses.
Dr. Prasanna, one moment. Rashmi, can you unmute Professor Easwaran?
I'm trying, I'm not able to. So.
Professor Easwaran, can you try to unmute yourself?
Yeah. Well, Dr. Prasanna, it was a fantastic talk. In fact, we really enjoyed the talk. I only wanted to ask that about the insurance Sundar Prakash mentioned. Is it only for the people below 60 or 65? Like I am a senior citizen, 80 plus.
Sir, at the moment, it is they're giving it only for less than 65. They do have a clause which says that above 65 will require medical help. So I would suggest they will not usually give that to you online. You can still contact your insurance agent. Okay. And if you undergo medical tests, I don't see any reason why they should not give it. Because even for people who are less than 65, what they say is that all pre-existing medical comorbidities are also covered as long as that becomes a part and parcel of the treatment of COVID. because we do understand that there is a big chunk of our population who are diabetic, has cardiac problems, etc.
Yeah. Thank you.
I see another question asking, when will the vaccine be ready? Probably December, January is a good guess. Fatality rate for 70 plus is close to around 7 to 8%. Virus is airborne. There is some research that it is showing virus is airborne. The point is, if you sneeze, it can go even up to around 8 to 10 feet. Now, it is extremely difficult to maintain that social distancing in a community setting. So typically what is advised is at least 1 meter. And over and above that, see, you need to do all the 3 things to get a good protection. It is not one thing. One point that all of us should remember is that we need to do multiple small things right to get the larger picture all right. So you need to do social distancing plus mask plus hand wash. And it has to be every single time.
Doctor, what about mild hypertension? Does that be called as a comorbidity? Because almost everybody in India above 45 have got some mild hypertension.
It is considered as a comorbidity. And if symptoms are there with these comorbidities, it is preferable to be in a COVID-19 hospital rather than at home or COVID care center. The point is, until we are able to admit somebody in a COVID hospital or a COVID care center, there is no need to panic for that first 1 day or 2 days. Because on a practical basis, it takes that much time to actually get a bed, as long as we are asymptomatic. And if we are symptomatic, any emergency department, as per the government guidelines of the COVID-19 hospitals that are designated, are supposed to admit, treat, give the emergency treatment and then shift. So what I would suggest is identify, I'm going to send that list to Rotarian Sundar Prakash, identify the hospitals around, and you can go to any emergency department with the COVID report. They will give you the first aid treatment. It may be a little expensive because the hospitals are going to charge for the PPE and all that. Don't worry about it. Get the emergency treatment. That is the trick in making sure that overall things are all right. Don't hesitate to get tested. Don't hesitate to go to a hospital. That's a message.
Thank you, doctor.
I see one.
Ashmi, can you unmute President of Jivan Bima Nagar, Rotarian Subhash?
Please unmute.
Meanwhile, doctor, there are many other questions. One question is from Rotarian SK Bajaj, our senior Rotarian. Is the current insurance policy, whatever you are having, holds good for COVID cover too?
All your healthcare insurance policies, whatever you have taken before, the government has made it compulsory that it has to cover COVID-19. The only point is they may not cover consumables and PPE. That's okay. That may form some 20-30% of the bill. The COVID-19 policies which I spoke about, which is specific only for COVID-19, they will not cover any other healthcare conditions. That has a waiting period of 15 days. That means today, if you take the policy, first 15 days it will not cover. After that, it will cover.
Okay, thank you, doctor. And there is a question from Rotarian Rajesh Kundar. My neighbor is COVID positive. Their house is not closed down or whatever is marked down. So what do I do?
We started in India, completely isolating apartment complexes and streets, but I guess now it's all over the place. So it may not be practical. As long as you are maintaining that social distancing, it's fine. There is actually no need. The point, generally in India, our culture has been, we know our neighbors. We go to their house, we come from there, or children play together. So all those things will need to be avoided. And it is like that, then it is better to get tested. But does it actually make sense to seal it, close it, do all of that? I'm not sure. I don't think that's actually going to help. And that's part and parcel of the reason why this stigmatization has actually occurred.
President Subhash, can you unmute yourself and ask your question, sir?
You're unmuted.
Thank you, Sundar. Yeah, I'm unmuted. Good evening, doctor. This is Subhash from Jeevan Vimanagar.
Good evening, Mr. Subhash. How are you?
Fine, sir. I was there for the inaugural function in President Ronnie Vincent's time.
Very nice of you.
Okay.
Very nice.
And thank you so much that you have mentioned about our project today in this meeting. Okay. I have a couple of questions related to the subject. One is, what will be the after effect of a COVID cured person? So many people are saying further ailments will follow, like cardiac related or kidney related. Is there any chances are there?
It's true. Around 15 to 20% will have what is called as residual COVID effects. Again, a vast majority, 80 to 85% don't have it. And the people who generally have it are also people who've had comorbidities, point one. Point two, these residual COVID effects are people who have developed moderate to severe symptoms, not the people who are having asymptomatic or having mild symptoms. So if you ask me, yes, the disease is still being understood. So 10 to 15% of them continue to, they may continue to have after effects, residual cardiac, kidney, etc.
Okay. So is there any chances that he can get the catch the corona again once it is cured, or from a different strain?
That's also a good question. What typically happens is, see, once we develop a virus, the body forms, once we get infected with the virus, the body forms antibodies. What are these antibodies? It is the body's immune system trying to fight that disease. Now, what they have found is that the antibodies slowly come down after 8 to 9 weeks. But the body has two types of immunity fighting mechanisms. One is antibodies and second is the T cell immunity. But T cell immunity is still there. So studies have yet not come out, but it looks like maybe 10 to 15% of the people may get a reinfection. And that generally happens after 3 to 4 months. And I see another question about this COVID antibodies, especially in Dharavi, where it was there in the news, which is a good thing. So bigger chunk of population developing these antibodies is good.
Okay. And this plasma treatment, what is it regarding? How it can be done?
So what happens is, supposing somebody tests COVID positive, they develop antibodies. Where do these antibodies stay? They stay in the plasma. Plasma is the liquid of the blood. Okay. So you take you take it out like a blood donation. You separate the plasma, match the group, and give it to a person who's developing moderate to severe disease very early in the disease, with the hope that the antibodies that the other person has developed, it
will help to fight.
but he's getting sick. So those antibodies will probably work. 50 to 60% of the time, it looks like it's working. But again, as I said, that's still research in progress. There are a lot of people, some of my colleagues, who have taken up this at an all India scale, where they're doing this plasma mapping. So once people test positive, they're keeping a contact along with their blood groups. And this plasma is anywhere taken after the 15th to 30th day. They test them to see whether those antibodies are there, and then they take it. And they're requesting volunteers who have been asymptomatic or mild symptoms who have recovered to become plasma donors. Yes, it does have a role. How much, when to use? Earlier they were using it once people became very sick. Now they're using it when moderate symptoms develop. All of that is, if I can use the word, work in progress. That is why somewhere in my talk I said, we need to bide our time. The longer it takes for us to get infected, doctors and hospitals understand the disease better.
Okay. Thank you, doctor.
Yeah,
And we will be in touch with you. We need, okay, with the new board of directors.
Right.
Few people are already in the call. We will get in touch with you separately.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
okay. Dr. Prasanna, there is one interesting question. We see everywhere they're doing temperature checks, mall or shops or wherever we go. But how sure am I whether these testers are working properly, and what is the calibration, or it is having certain design to calibrate it every 40 checks or 100 times they use it?
It's a good question. Unfortunately, most of these are made in China, and more than 30 to 40% of them don't work very well. The second point is the people who are screening it don't even know what the normal temperature is. You can test, just go and ask that security chap who's screening it, what is the normal temperature? He doesn't know. It's not a very wise thing to have it, but anyway, people have it. But at home, what I would recommend is to get a digital thermometer. It's the same thermometer which we used to use when we were small with the mercury one, but it's the digital one. And get a pulse oximeter. A good pulse oximeter, it's available in Amazon, Flipkart, wherever. Or if somebody becomes COVID positive, the hospital will supply to you. Once somebody is waiting in the quarantine or in the isolation, test your oxygen level every 4 hours and then start writing it. At any point of time, consistently for more than 2 to 3 readings, if it is less than 94%, it means it's time to get admitted in the hospital. That is what is important.
Okay, the next two questions are, one is regarding homeopathy, Ayurvedic, are they recommended?
I'm an allopath, so I won't be the right person to comment on it. But anything that boosts and increases immunity, why not? As long as it doesn't harm. See, there are some important things in this. There is a psychological, see, it is a viral infection. There's very little that we can do to avoid it. Anything that helps, anything that makes people feel that they're doing something, as long as.
Okay, now coming back to the one question on antibodies, there was a question, I think you briefly touched upon Mumbai Dharawai slums. Big chunk of people there, more than 60% of the people there are got antibodies. Is it really a good sign, or?
It's a good sign. It's a good sign because it means that that subset of a population mostly won't get infected. 80% of them won't get infected. 15 to 20% of them still can get infected. It's a good sign. It's a good sign.
Okay,
and that is why the government needs to do community-based studies, which they did in Delhi, sample population of around 30,000 people, and then they figured out that around 15% of them have developed antibodies. These are people who've been asymptomatic, who've never been tested for COVID, who have don't know a contact who has developed COVID. So it's there everywhere. So we need to continue to take the precautions. Don't self-treat, test early. If required, get admitted in the hospital early. And please map it out. So wherever your place of residence is, make sure that you have 4 or 5 hospitals around. I'll send you the list, entire Bangalore list. Make sure that you know their phone numbers. You reach out to the ER. See if you can get in touch with doctors whom you know, who can at least guide you for that first 2-3 days. Don't panic. I will also send you home quarantine guidelines, which you can read it through. So if somebody needs to be quarantined or isolated, what needs to be done. Also, how do you protect the other family members? So that during that period of 2-3 days when you're waiting for the report to come. I will also send you a list of where they do the tests. Earlier, a doctor's prescription was required. Now ICMR has said no doctor's prescription is required. Anybody can go and take a test. There are certain BBMP sites which do a free test, and there are multiple places where you can pay and take a test. The government has dropped and capped the prices at rupees 3,000. Anybody who has symptoms can go and give their Aadhaar card or some government ID, and they can take the test. No problem.
Okay. Our senior member, Arjun Menwade. Sir, please unmute yourself and ask your question.
Yeah. Good evening, doctor.
Good evening, sir. Sir, you have to unmute yourself.
Informative session. Hello, can you hear me? Hello.
Yes.
Can you hear me, sir?
Yes.
So it was very creative and very informative session. I have one question, doctor. See, we hear about 2 types of testing. One is rapid antigen test, another is RT-PCR test. Which is more reliable and more accurate?
Okay, the RT-PCR test is the more reliable one. RT-PCR actually picks up the material from the RNA and the DNA of the virus. and that is generally picked up through a nasopharyngeal swab or an oropharyngeal swab. And there is a technique in which parts are identified. So that's the best test currently available. But RT-PCR becomes positive after 5 days and can be positive up to 14 days. And a small 5 to 10% of them, it can be positive up to 28 days. RT-PCR tells you that the virus is there in the body. That's all. It doesn't tell you anything else. Okay. That is why that incubation period of 5 days. So if somebody whom you know has tested positive, if you are asymptomatic, you need to get tested after 5 days. If you are symptomatic, you have to get tested immediately. That is about RT-PCR. Second test is your rapid antigen test. Antigen means that you are having active infection now. So if your rapid antigen test is positive, that means you are infected with the virus. If your rapid antigen test is negative, it does not mean that you don't have the virus. You still need to repeat an RT-PCR. But the advantage of rapid antigen is it is cheaper, some 400 to 700 rupees, and the reports comes in 1 or 2 hours. It is easier to screen. If you want 250 people to get onto the flight, within 20-25 minutes, you'll be able to get the reports. At least you'll know if somebody is having an active infection. It still doesn't rule out, right? And then you have the antibody. Antibody are again 2 types, IgG and IgM, one of which develops 7th to 15th day and another develops from 15th day onwards. That is proof that you've had the infection and the body has developed a fight against it. That is what is called as antibody. So these are the things.
What is the lead time for RT-PCR test to get the results, sir?
Nowadays in private labs, it comes in around 24 to 32 hours. Say if you give it in the morning today, by mid-morning, next day you will get it. Government labs, because of the sheer backlog of cases, it can take up to 2 days.
Oh, thank you, doctor.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, President Bharat, I think you can ask your question. You have posted 3.
Yeah, Doctor, first I must thank you for an excellent talk. Actually, this is the clearest, best talk I've heard from a doctor ever. And I sincerely mean that. I mean, even the PowerPoint presentation was the best I've seen, and it was very clear and very suited for lay people. And coming to my questions, I had several questions, so I'll go through them quickly. One is it risky to be in an air-conditioned room along with others? The second question is, there is a rumor that this could be an artificially made virus by the Chinese which escaped. What is your opinion on that? And third question I have is, we hear that if you suddenly develop symptoms and go to a hospital, people are turning them away saying you first get a report. So what is the procedure? We first get a report, only then approach a hospital, or the hospital, suppose, we have emergency kind of symptoms. Can the hospital really refuse to admit us?
Okay, all 3 very interesting questions. I'll take your last question first. So if you have symptoms, there is a list of fever clinics. I'll share that also with Rotarian Sundar Prakash. He will share it to you. So you can go to a fever clinic. And what they will do in the fever clinics are, government has fever clinics, and there are designated private hospitals that have fever clinics. Almost all hospitals have, except specialty hospitals, like, for example, our hospital or Narayana Nethralaya, etc., except specialty hospitals. So you go to the fever clinic in working hours. So they will do an assessment, they will test you, and they will give you symptomatic treatment. Right? That is, I'm saying, if somebody has mild symptoms. You can also go to a BBMP fever clinic where they will test you. Third thing, if you develop moderate to severe symptoms, you can go to any emergency room of these COVID-19 designated hospitals, and they will still admit you and test you. See, the point what we should try to understand is there are two issues. One, are you getting admitted through the government? If you get admitted through the government, either in a government hospital or in a government designated bed in a private hospital, then we require the BU number, the test, etc., etc. But the treatment is free. If you get admitted through self-paying facility or through your insurance, most of the hospitals will accept. You need to map the hospitals around, right? So that is to answer that first question. Second question is about China. To be very honest, we'll never know the answer. They're never going to accept, and everybody else on the planet are going to blame them. It could have happened, but we never know. There's never going to be an answer to that. And regarding air condition, see, first you need to understand what is the type of air conditioning which is there. If it is an air conditioning that recirculates the air, which is the most common type of air conditioner, which are your split air conditioners and your window air conditioners, it is quite risky, especially if you do not maintain social distancing. To some extent, it's okay if you wear masks. If you are in an air-conditioned room, say for example in an operation theater, where the air exchanges are some 45 to 50 air exchanges per hour, and it brings in 20 to 30% of fresh air. If you have central air conditioning that brings in fresh air, then you're all right. But as I told in my earlier slides about social distancing, anywhere where you put in more people in a closed area, in the current situation, there is always a risk. So everybody needs to wear a mask, and the mask should be worn properly. The nostrils should not be visible. And in our country, what happens is, see, we are very used to looking at people facial cues. So even in our hospital practice, when patients or family members come, by reflex, they take out the mask when they sit. So we'll have to request them to put it back. And then we'll see that most of them adjust it like this. I mean, it's difficult. People do not know. So we need to educate them. So even if you do not have an option, and if you are 3-4 people in an air-conditioned room, make sure that social distancing is there. Let the AC run, but open the windows and the door. So that is something that you could do.
Thank you, doctor. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, doctor. Initially, doctor had given us time maximum of 45 minutes. I think he's extended by another 30 minutes. So we will take the last question, or maybe doctor, if you are free, we can continue for another 5-10 minutes.
No, you can continue. I said I'll speak for 40 minutes. I think I spoke more than that.
Okay, good. Okay, we can continue. There is a question on should we really take all these kind of tablets, vitamin D, vitamin C, zinc, etc.?
See, what happens is, see, in India, we are dark-skinned people generally. And why we became dark-skinned is we've been exposed to the sun more than our Caucasian counterparts. So therefore, what happens currently, majority of our population are vitamin D depleted because we do not have that much of sun exposure normally in our normal routines itself. Now with this lockdown, that sun exposure is almost gone. Vitamin D is a sunlight exposure vitamin. Vitamin D also takes care of the immune system. So therefore, taking vitamin D supplements after checking your vitamin D levels or taking it maybe once a week, it is a good step. Similarly with vitamin C, vitamin B and zinc. So the best is to take a multivitamin where you get all of these things. Vitamin D, you will not get the required daily dose with a multivitamin. You can take a multivitamin, any multivitamin. It will give you the required daily dose of C, zinc, B, everything else. Only D, you take it separately. You can take a sachet or a tablet form, it's available. But yes, vitamins are required for your immune system. The other thing which I did not tell you is what is called as the 6-minute test. So even if you have mild symptoms or you're asymptomatic, if you are able to walk briskly for 6 minutes without a drop in saturation with your pulse oximeter, that means you're all right. So therefore, it is important to continue to maintain physical fitness. You can continue to walk with social distancing. You can jog. You can do all of that. Of course, you can't go to a gym, but maintain good physical activity, because as long as your respiratory system is good, Even if we get infected, then there are chances that we will come out of it better. I see another question, will they admit without a COVID test report? All hospitals have what is called as a quarantine or an isolation facility, where when somebody has symptoms that are moderate to severe, they will admit them under the what is called the COVID-19 suspect category. They will test them. They will continue to treat with all the precautions, PPEs, etc. They will wait for the COVID-19 report. If it is positive, they will continue to treat. If it is negative, they will move them to another area and continue the treatment. Because see what happens, this COVID-19 mimics so many disorders. Pneumonia is also very common in our country. It mimics everything. And sometimes what happens, the first COVID test will be negative, but clinically if they suspect, they may continue to treat in isolation and they will repeat a test after 3 days. And the second COVID test may be positive. Again, I'm talking about that small subset of people who have moderate to severe symptoms. Unfortunately, most of the media highlights only that. This person did not get a bed, that person passed away, this age they passed away. So if you look at it in sheer numbers, that is just 1 to 2%. See, India loses 3 lakh people to road traffic accidents every year. And 12 lakh people get significantly injured. That is such a big number, and nobody speaks about road safety. In fact, the lockdown has dropped this road traffic accident rate significantly. It has come down by 95%, you know, in the peak of the initial lockdown one. So this is all there. So we need to continue to remain positive.
Okay, there's a question from Professor Iswaran on the providing masks to our house helpers. What type of masks we need to provide, and how sure are we they are maintaining those masks in cleanliness, like you explained, washing and all that, or we should provide them as they come in every day to our house?
See, that's a good question. Any household help, because I'm talking to you about the length of the pandemic, which may take almost a year. Any household help, we cannot be without household help. Some because we are in the vulnerable age group, some because we are working. That's fine. The point about household help is please consider them as potential carriers. That is the step one. No need to stigmatize, but they are potential carriers. They are younger, they may not have symptoms. So when they come in, they need to wash their hands, give them a mask. They need to wear the mask throughout the time that they're there in the house. When they go, discard the mask. It can be a surgical mask. It costs some 3 rupees, 4 rupees. Or if you're giving them a cloth mask, they have to wash it. Teach them how to wear the mask. Make sure that they don't touch all this. Maintain social distancing with them. Open all the windows. Open all the doors to the extent possible. It is critical to maintain social distancing. Especially if you have elderly at home and children at home, you need to maintain social distancing. And you need to explain it to them. You need to tell them that this is why we are doing it, otherwise they're going to feel bad. All along, we've been in the kitchen with them. And then today you stand 10 feet apart, you know it's going to be a problem. So it's preferable to explain, they will understand. Preferable not to do activities in the same room. So see, why I'm giving you all these tips is nothing is foolproof. But unfortunately, the virus is going to be with us for a very long time. And we need to learn to live with the virus, and we need to learn to adapt. And better to adapt with decent amount of safe practices. Despite all of this, we may still get it. I mean, that's all right. 98% of the time will be all right.
Okay, I have one last question from my side. Who decides your mild or moderate symptoms? I'm asymptomatic. I feel very good, but I tested positive, but I have no symptoms at all.
There are 2 ways to do this. One, you can consult a doctor virtually who will run you through what are the symptoms that is required. 2, you can tie up with a hospital that will give you home isolation care virtually. And they will give you, over the email, they will send you what is mild, what is moderate. And they will send you a kit which has masks, pulse oximeter, hand sanitizer, etc. and they will give you a chart which you can maintain. It's a very simple thing to maintain. They'll train you how to do it. A nurse will speak to you twice a day. A doctor will speak to you alternate day, and a dietitian will speak to you once. So that's generally how these packages are made. The second option is, if you are not able to isolate yourself at home, you can choose a government COVID care center, and some of them are very good. We had a couple of our staff who got infected, and we had to send them, and they were quite happy with the COVID care centers. They sent pictures, especially the COVID care center that is there at the Hajj Bhavan, and the COVID care center that is there in Sri Sri Ravi Shankar's ashram. They're fantastic places, and they are taken care really well. You have volunteers in PPE taking care of them. It's mind-boggling the amount of work that they're actually doing, and truly appreciated. So that's one way of doing it. The third way of doing it is to get admitted in a hotel, which is co-managed by a hospital. So you'll have a doctor rounds once a day, and the hotel will provide you a room, and you can choose the different type of hotels. There are enough tie-ups that's available, and they will give you food. They will do the laundry. They will do the housekeeping once or twice, every alternate day. So what I would suggest is that, I've given you so much of information. Around your house, next 3 to 4 kilometers, you map out. COVID care center is this, hotel is this, hospital is this, health insurance policy is this, virtually they're doing this. I think that's a plan that we need to have, because the time that we are speaking of, almost another 15 months, is a very long time. And in that time, by the time we get vaccinated, there are chances that somebody, and there are so many people coming and going from our house, right? And I don't think we can avoid it. So better to be prepared. And as I told you, every 15 days, 20 days, there is so much of medical information that's coming in on how to treat this. And hopefully at some point of time, we will get much better and bring down the fatality ratio. But the current problem in India is that vast majority of them don't want to get tested, and they don't want to go to a hospital. That's actually rising these fatality rates. I'll send all the lists to Rotarian Sundar Prakash. I think he can share it with you.
Okay, there are two more questions in the chat session. One is from our senior Rotarian SK Bajaj. One who has autoimmune disorder, which is under control by taking mild doses of steroids. What is the medical advice for him?
You will be considered in the vulnerable age group. So when you if you're tested positive, you're required to get admitted, because steroids reduces the immunity. So anybody who is on immunosuppressive therapy, or anybody who has significant comorbidities, even if you are asymptomatic, cannot practice home quarantine, needs to be in a COVID-19 facility, COVID-19 hospital, proper hospital. Because then they will monitor and then take it forward. But just be aware that steroids have now come in a big way. And there are a lot of studies now coming about inhalational steroids. There are also certain companies world over that are trying to manufacture inhalable vaccines. Animal studies are going on, because I guess if you want to inoculate 4.5 billion people all across the world, which may take around 2 years, it's extremely difficult to do that with injections. So they're looking at, and you're looking at, a country as vast as ours. Imagine a country like Africa, a country like South America. So it's very difficult. So they're looking at alternate methods of vaccination. So a lot will come up in 6 months to 8 months.
Okay, thank you. We'll take the last two questions since we are reaching towards 9 o'clock. This is from Jeevan Bhima Nagar, Rotarian Ramesh. Please unmute yourself and ask your question, sir. Rotarian Ramesh, Jeevan Bhima Nagar. Okay, we will proceed till Rotarian Ramesh joins in. This is a question from our president. Is it okay to go for jogging, walking, running without a mask as long as we maintain social distancing?
You can. There's no problem with that. But the point is, you have to maintain proper social distancing. You also have to comply with your community guidelines, like your apartment or if you're staying in a community setting. Because generally in a community setting, in the lift, you have to wear a mask. On the corridor, you have to wear a mask. On walking paths and jogging paths, you may not wear a mask, but you have to maintain social distancing. And you can walk with a mask also, you just need to get used to it. Jogging with a mask is very difficult.
Rotarian Ramesh, you're able to unmute?
Yeah, thanks, Rotarian Sundar Prakash. Now I think someone unmuted me. Thanks for that. And huge round of virtual applause to Dr. Prasanna Venkatesh. I think this has been one of the best, COVID, set of information that we have received from a doctor or a non-practicing doctor. Especially when I compare with the presentations made by WHO representatives. So I have one specific question, which is more statistical in nature. We were told that specifically by WHO that 60 to 70% of the world population ought to get, impacted some way or the other, either, being an asymptomatic or symptomatic, impact. So, what is your opinion, Doctor, more from an Indian context?
That is my point about herd immunity. It is similar to that. Once you get 60 to 65% of the population who get infected, they could be symptomatic or asymptomatic. Then what typically happens is the virus does not have anywhere else to spread or replicate, and the pandemic will flatten out. That is how all the earlier pandemics flattened out. If you look at the 1919 Spanish flu, close to somewhere 19 million people died across the world. It killed more people than World War I and World War II together. They thought that the war was over, and then you see how many of us even studied about the Spanish flu pandemic. All of us had in the history class World War I and World War II. So pandemics go out of memory very quickly. Unfortunately, in the current sitting, herd immunity is not a very wise option. Countries tried it, like the United Kingdom tried it first and they lost the battle, and then they changed. Sweden currently is trying it. So what typically happens if you look at an Indian population of 1.3 billion, 60% is 700 million. In 700 million, if 2% of them require to die, that's 14 million. That's 1.4 crore people need to die. So that's a very, very expensive way to look at it. And I don't think the Indian government from day one, that's why we went into a lockdown mode, because we knew that our healthcare facilities simply cannot warrant it. Imagine the PPE kits which you see so commonly now, that blue and that white and everything. We had to import all of them from China. And in that 60 days, we became the world's largest producer of PPE kits. And now 2 weeks back, the government has lifted it that we can export it outside. All of that has happened because of the lockdown. And our country is too big, too diverse, multiple governments. Health is a state subject, not the central subject. And what happens is, I think these lockdowns have helped us to some extent. And then after 2-3 months, we found that the economic impact of the lockdowns became very severe. Also, there is a sort of fatigue from everyone. And then you open it up. And when you open it up, you naturally expect the surge. If a herd immunity happens like what has happened in Dharavi slum, that's a fantastic thing. But then if you go promptly by statistics, that's a scary thing. So I don't think any government will permit herd immunity. So you'll have to, and herd immunity comes by around 1.5 years, it will come. It will come. So our best bet is the vaccine.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Prasanna. Now, President Bharat, please take over.
Yeah, I would like to thank Dr. Prasanna for the best talk I've ever heard on COVID. And actually, it's the best talk I ever heard from a doctor, for that matter. So I would thank you all for attending. It's been extremely useful. And I really want to thank Dr. our Rotarian Sundar Prakash for bringing Dr. Prasanna here. And he moderated the questions also very well. So it has been an excellent contribution by Sundar Prakash. And I request our Club Services Director, Pranjit Datta, to give the formal vote of thanks.
Thank you.
Dr. Prasanna, it was a pleasure having you. And as everybody said, and everybody felt that it was one of the best talks we as Rotarians had. So we thanks a lot for taking your time out in your busy schedule and to enlighten us on the pros and cons of this particular pandemic. Thank you very much, Doctor. Wish you all the best. Take care. Stay safe. Thank you.
Thank you.
I would like to formally conclude this meeting. So if you have any further clarifications, you can contact Sundar Prakash and he will help you out with Dr. Prasanna, who has been most helpful and cooperative. So I formally conclude the meeting. So good night all, stay safe and keep all the protocols that Dr. Prasanna has told us in mind. Thank you. Good night.